Hey, I'm J.R. Lay, and welcome back to the Level Up Business Podcast. One of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs face isn't finding the next big opportunity. It's staying energized, adaptable, and connected while still juggling it all. You know, it's so easy to get stuck on autopilot doing the same things, talking to the same people, and slowly over time, you begin to lose perspective, the perspective that once gave you your entrepreneurial edge. That's why in today's episode, I'd like to introduce you to Jeremy Clark. Jeremy is not your typical entrepreneurial CEO. Yes, he's acquired businesses in financial services, but he's also chaired the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra. He has served on the science board at McGill University, and now he even takes the stage as a stand-up comic. But through it all, Jeremy has discovered the most important thing that any entrepreneur can discover, which is how to protect their confidence. And Jeremy protects his confidence. He protects it by continuing to grow, by continuing to build friendships, relationships with people that span from 20 all the way up to 102 years old. But what's his secret? It's curiosity. It's empathy. And it's a willingness to challenge himself in completely new ways and completely new arenas and areas of his life. So, if you have been feeling stuck, if you've been feeling stagnant, if you've been feeling a little bit burned out lately, this conversation with Jeremy is going to give you a fresh perspective. It's also going to give you practical inspiration to level up your life so that you can level up your business. But first, if you are a visionary B2B entrepreneur who wants to transform your past experience being one of the most valuable assets as an entrepreneur, and you want to transform that past experience into IP that elevates your influence, increases your income, send me a text right now, 832-240-1922. That's because I want to show you. I want to teach you how you can turn video content just like this into a published book that monetizes your unique wisdom. Now, let's get ready to learn. Let's get ready to grow. Let's get ready to level up with Jeremy.
So, where are you based?
Where was I, Audrey? I'm in Houston. I was up in your neck of the woods, Saskatchewan.
Okay. I was just there. I was there a month ago. We bought a business there. So I was, and then of course I used that as another platform for stand-up comedy. So I actually did 4 gigs in the month of June. 1 in Regina, 1 in Toronto, and 2 in LA.
Wow.
So those are just add-ons to business, by the way. It's just, something fun to do.
Well, let's talk about that. You know, Jeremy, you've got the intersection of, it's almost like a renaissance. You've got financial services as an entrepreneur. You are the co-chair and faculty of the science board at McGill University. You are the past president of the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra. You've got this new venture that you're doing with stand-up comedy. Before we start trying to find the intersections there of balancing and managing, but most importantly, having fun as you're doing all of this, what is good in your world right now? What's positive to begin?
I think positive. I do so many different things. I always say to people, the reason I do so many things is to protect my own confidence, I think, because there's not any given day that all those things are usually going badly. Maybe 1 or 2, but then the other ones are going well. And I get to interact with a lot of interesting people. I think probably like you, JR, you meet a lot of people. You have your own business. I know you have other stuff going on as well. And meeting people is really, really interesting. Sometimes those people frustrate you, but I would say 90 to 95% of people I meet I actually really like. And the variety of my life allows me to have friends. I would say I have good friends between the ages of 20 and 102. My oldest friend is 102. I'm seeing him tomorrow for lunch. And I think just having that breadth of friendships in all different areas of my life keeps me grounded, keeps me humble, and also keeps me pushing. The 102-year-old, if you think my resume looks interesting, imagine me with 52 more years under my belt. He's a Renaissance man, and he's someone that I really admire a lot. And I feel like if I have someone like that in my life, I can never get too far ahead of myself. So
it's so interesting
is the answer, I think.
No. You mentioned this 102-year-old in your life, and I think about like my wife and I. We have a breadth of friendships, ranging different age spans, incomes, educations, life. It's just I think that's what adds so much color and depth to life. And so I think about this 102-year-old friend that you have. My goodness, what they have seen, because if you just stop and pause for a moment, it is 2025 as of recording. We go back to 1925 minus 2, that's 1923.
Yeah.
Imagine what they have lived through, what they have seen, what they have experienced. It's just like, wow.
Well, what's amazing about it to that point is this gentleman is a Cambridge man, as in, probably the top university in the world, Cambridge in England. And his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were also dons at the school. So essentially Cambridge is about 25 colleges. That's what makes up the university. And so essentially he comes from a long line of academics. And so he was trained as a surgeon, and he literally walked down to the Air Force Base and convinced someone to teach him how to fly. So he became a pilot, and then he would do high altitude experiments on himself, for example. Just one of many examples. And so to your point, I mean, this is back in the day, you could walk into an airstrip, as he calls it, and convince someone to let you fly, and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll give that a try. While he was still training for general surgery.
Yes. And I think that's so unique, and it's like now, to think about what that experience, and then one of the things that I talk a lot about when I do keynotes is I'll walk in, and within the first 5 minutes, I'm going to say, listen, I'm going to make you very uncomfortable with the next question I'm going to ask, but and I know you're in 10X and elevated, and we're trying to grow and elevate ourselves, and so it's who we're around, but also, as Dan says, all transformation starts by telling the truth. All growth all progress starts by telling the truth. So I said, okay, this is the question I'm going to ask. How old were you in 1994? And you start to see people squirm and whatnot. I'm like, listen, this is not about how old you are today. It's about how old you were back then, because I have this hypothesis of how old you were in 1994 is really directly influencing how you perceive the world now. And because in 1994, that was the year that the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity, and that's been 30 years. But now we're in this whole new era of not just the internet, but the age of AI. And so I think about what's going to happen, not just in 30 years, not in 10, but by 2030, over the next 5 years. And now it's like this gentleman who's 102. How much do you think perspective plays?
You know what's really funny, JR? I did not know you were going to ask this question, so this is going to sound like a very scripted answer. But my older daughter, who's 14, she's in a math camp for the next couple of weeks. And so in her school, math is very important. So over the weekend, she's like, Daddy, I want this specific graphing calculator. So we go on Amazon, she finds it, and you're not going to believe this. It's the old Texas Instruments TI-84. And I'm like, I had that
TI-82
30 years ago. The only difference is it has a USB port now, and the graphs are in color. So it made me think, what else in my life? And I do have another example. Like I like watches. So this watch here is probably about 40 years old. And so I would say this watch and the Texas Instruments TI-84, which I think was probably the TI-83 at the time. I can't think of any two other examples. I mean, those two things have been pretty steady, and everything else is completely different.
So your oldest daughter, she's 14.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My oldest son's 15. So very similar context. And I think what's interesting is when you said TI, Texas Instruments, I immediately thought TI-82. And one of the things that whenever I was back in school, it would frustrate me so much. It's like you'd use these graphing calculators, and then it's like when it came time to the test, you had to clear the memory. Well, I found a way to start storing notes without clearing the memory. And there was this moral dilemma back then. I remember getting in an argument with my parents. They're like, well, that's cheating. I go, is it cheating, or did I figure out a way to work smarter?
Yeah, be more efficient.
Efficient, exactly. And I think that's the frustrating part, particularly in the world of education. And you're in that world, with the universities. I'd be interested to get your take on what you're hearing on that side. Because like with my kids, Luvik's, he's 15. He's super interested in flying. He wants to go to flight school. Like he wants to be a pilot. Like that's his thing. My oldest daughter, she's 13, but we've been working, especially probably her and I, the closest out of all the kids, on interfacing with AI when she was 11, she wrote her first book. It was co-written with ChatGPT, prompting, but she learned a very valuable lesson early on. She had to be the subject matter expert. So she did all the research traditionally, and then she was working with ChatGPT to co-author the book, but she had to have the knowledge to understand when ChatGPT was essentially hallucinating and giving false information. Then she worked with Dolly to illustrate the book, and then we went to Canva and then published and printed the book. And she actually has a book in the library of her school, which is kind of cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But it's like when you think about what's going on in the world of education and perspective, once again, what are you hearing that may or may not be like, it's like back in the day, the TA tool too. It's like, oh, you're quote unquote cheating. And I'm like, no, it's just efficiency and looking at things differently. It's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, that's a really good question and good perspective. I think one of the things I work on at McGill. So my background is actually neuroscience. So when I was at McGill, I was studying biology, and then I specialized in neuro the past couple of years when I was there. And so it's a pretty technical education from a very good school. And having been on that board of science, if you can believe this, for 18 years now, and chair for the past 11, one of the things I get to do is they have a council of chairs at McGill. So all the chairs of the faculties get together a couple times a year. And I'm one of those people who will say things like, why do we need specific degrees in undergrad? I understand graduate school, but why don't we just give people a degree in learning? Because if you look at, let's say, what a technical college is doing in 2 years versus what a classic big name university is doing in 4, I think we could have a debate about who's being more efficiently educated. And I think if you look at the McGill or Harvard or Stanford experience in the past 50 years, these are great schools with brilliant minds, hundreds of Nobel Prizes between them. But are you preparing people to be out in the actual workforce? And I think there's the technical college model, there's the university model, and there's the learn on the job or on the fly model. I certainly feel that, I learn more from doing things and getting out in the world and trying stuff than I think I ever learned from being in a university. And it's interesting, obviously, being chair of this faculty, I do have respect for education, but I think with the rise of AI, with students, I think being a lot more assertive than they perhaps were in the past in terms of their own individual rights and their learning path, my feeling is this is a lot more in the hands of the students than it ever was before. If you think of the 102-year-old and his father and grandfather, you can imagine those days where the professors at Cambridge wore robes, they came in, they dispensed information of the highest quality, and then you would absorb that information. I think it's a lot more interactive now and will be even more so going forward, which to me is to the benefit of the students and society in general.
That is super fascinating, and it makes me think about how the commoditization of pretty much everything. I mean, the internet commoditized almost every single vertical. I think what we're going to see is how AI continues that. In fact, it influenced a lot of my thinking to launch Level Up Business. I mean, 23 years as an entrepreneur in financial services, in banking, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm getting very frustrated fighting the same battles over the last 2 decades. No one's has the growth mindset. Starting to get involved in some of these other entrepreneurial communities in 2017. I kept growing, and it's almost like I had someone in the industry say, have you ever considered that you've outgrown the industry? And I was like, I haven't thought about that, but
100%. Yes.
Well, it's like I had like, and then you get into like what Dr. Benjamin Hardy writes about be your future self now, and 10x is easier than 2x. Like I had all of this quote unquote equity, 2 best-selling books, one of the top 5% podcasts in the world. I was like, what am I going to do? Like leave all that behind? But then it's like, no, that was just all of the education. Like you said, you learn by doing. I learned by doing. And it's fascinating because I think about my last 23 years as an entrepreneur. I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college. And in fact, I got accepted to Rice University in Houston, Texas. Very, very good school. And they were like, and this was for my MBA. And they're like, well, you're going to have to stop your business. You got to go all in. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't for me. Now I think the world has completely changed. It's like they would really welcome some of that. But I had no idea that you had a neuro background. That's super fascinating.
Yes.
And thinking about what you're doing today.
Yeah, I personally I feel like I use that all the time because I deal with people quite a bit, and the neuro kind of bleeds into psychology as well. And so I find I use that in my business career every day. But to your point, I mean, I'm in my office today in Calgary, right downtown here, and I don't think I've actually been in this office in 2 or 2.5 weeks. I have such a good team. I'm out of town a lot. I'm always in touch with the business, so I do work every day, but I'm a 50-year-old guy who I hope has embraced this modern future of work where the higher the performer at our company, the more flexibility we give them. So, and I could see you being that way as well. The high performers deserve flexibility. People that are medium or lower performers can still be valuable, but they need to have more structure around them. And I think that's more the delicacy of modern business where I think a lot of the more traditional business structures just don't accommodate that. And So you're right. I think Rice University would love to have you back today with a more modern version of you and their definition of what an MBA is, right? So,
well, it's interesting because I wrapped up my MBA in 2006, and in hindsight, in retrospect, I don't have a lot of regrets in life. And I'm big on education. My wife's big on education. I mean, she sits on a lot of boards here in the local school district. We really believe in education, but I think it's the world of education has continued to evolve because it's like, I tell my kids, I don't really care what grades you make. I care about one thing. A, you learn how to read. B, so that way you can teach yourself anything. B, you learn how to write.
yes.
So that you can then reflect on what you're reading and develop your critical thinking skills. Because I think that ability of critical thinking is going to be the big thing in this age of AI that gets us to the next thing, to do the things that we could even think were possible just 3 to 5 years ago. If I think about the speed of all of this, and I think what's fascinating is the way that you frame yourself is you used to be a financial advisor. Now you run a company full of advisors better than you. And so you get to build through acquisitions, you coach the team, you do the charitable work, stand-up comedy. We'll come back to that in just a second. But if you think about your entrepreneurial journey, how have you leveled up over the years? What has changed with you and just your own? And I think the theme of our conversation, once again, these unfold pretty organically. It's perspective. And perspective that I look at is the sum of context and framing. And so every single one of us has a very unique perspective. But what about you? How has your perspective shifted over the years as an entrepreneur?
I think as an entrepreneur, even 10 years ago, because I've been at this company actually for 26 years. So despite my meandering path, I've actually been at one entity for my entire adult life, starting as an intern and now owning most of the company and being the CEO. So I've seen the entire evolution. I think what hasn't changed is that we don't have any clients who have ever said, I don't want you to care about me. I've never had a client say that. However, the delivery mechanism of what we do has changed quite a bit. So the old traditional quarterly meetings, very scripted, things of that nature are largely gone, and everyone has more of a custom tailored communication plan, which is driven by their own behavior, not by us forcing them to do anything. We do a lot more mass communication now than ever before. So our clients get to see me once a quarter, hosting an event much like this where we have guests, and they know that I'm not too far from the business. The biggest thing though is my schedule 10 years ago was literally I'd be in this office, and we've been in these offices for 20 years, this physical space.
Wow.
I would be here all day, every day in client meetings, losing my mind. Not that I don't care about people, but you reach a saturation point where you're talking about a lot of the same things again and again and again. And my feeling is, as I became more intelligent, and I really feel like I became more intelligent as I was open to learning more, and then you realize what you don't know as well. And you mentioned this earlier. I felt I was really leveling myself up as a human being, and a lot of our clients were still like at the same level they were. And that led to a lot of frustration for me. And I was actually worried we're going to start losing from key clients, because I would sit in meetings and go like, I can't relate to these people anymore. And it's not that I'm smarter or have different skills. I think the thing is I'm just very curious, and I'm continuing to push and learn and collaborate. And I think a lot of people get to a point in life where, let's say they're at an airplane and they get to their cruising altitude, and they just kind of cruise it on in for the rest of their life with sort of this gentle decline, or sometimes a very rapid decline. And what I love about the coaching programs that you and I are in, and there's many of them out there, is that you're full of people that are successful, but they're striving for more, and they're also enjoying their lives. They're not psychotically just stuffing their schedule every day. They want to have complete lives, regardless, I think, of religion or race or anything like that. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that out of that frustration, we've built a whole philanthropic model to take somebody who really is fairly bored, has a lot of money and not a lot of outlets for that, and help them find purpose in life without being overbearing about it and saying, well, your purpose has to be our purpose. So that has been the most interesting thing in the past 10 years, is I went from being very frustrated with those interactions to now thinking, wow, we've really actually helped people to essentially unlock money and free up some time to do important things in the world.
That's interesting, because as you were going through your frustration of hearing the same thing, saying the same thing, doing the same thing over and over and over again, that was me with my previous business, because it was like, ugh. Like I am curious. I know I don't know it all. I love to learn, and so I went through, and it's like, what's going to give me the greatest amount of energy? If we think about like that 25-year future that Dan talks about, it's like, okay, I love to make connections with people. I love to have conversations. I love to co-create content, just as you and I are doing here. Some of that gets packaged up into curriculum. Some of that gets packaged up into a book. And then you can build a community around that. And it's what I did in my previous business, but now it's like I want to do this with other entrepreneurs, because whenever I did that, it changed my whole life. It elevated my brand, it increased my revenue, and it just gave me a sense of appreciation. And it's like, okay, you wow, what if we did this for all these other entrepreneurs too? Because every person, every entrepreneur has a unique perspective. They have unique wisdom that they've gained along their entrepreneurial journey. I mean, even today, it's like we're unlocking some of this and sharing this with others. Come back to this point of philanthropic, because I think that's important. You mentioned this point about purpose, and I think about some ancient wisdom that says, like, where there's no vision, people perish. Where there's no purpose, people will perish. It's like you got to be doing something beyond just what you've always done, which gets back to the point of the bigger future. How have you been able to integrate this into your own life? Because I know you have other areas like the university, like the Philharmonic Orchestra. What does that look like for you as you've continued to grow, as you continue to level up and elevate? You are looking at these other areas of your life to create value in, and for others to help to see them elevate.
Yeah. Let me give you one example of this. So with the Philharmonic, I'm lucky that I have a lot of mentors in my life too, older people, younger people I respect. So I was on the board of the Philharmonic for 10 years and ran it for the last 3 or 4 years of my tenure. And I would talk to people, like more older traditional board members, and I would say to them, I would just mention musicians' names. There's 65 players in the Calgary Philharmonic, so it's a very good orchestra. And I would mention someone's name, and there was sort of this blank look in these people's faces, and they've been on the board for years. And I realized they didn't actually know anybody in this orchestra. They thought a board member should be hands off, don't get too close to the people, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my model, as you can imagine, is different. I thought, if I can lead this thing, I really want to understand what people are doing. And so I would make an effort to go to musicians' parties. I would go on stage after and talk to them. It didn't take too much of my time, but even now, and I haven't been on the board for about 4 years now, if I walk into the musicians' lounge at intermission, it's like 40 people come over and greet me and say they're happy to see me. And thanks for the difference you made, thanks for the money you raised and how you helped us grow the orchestra. And I was simply curious. And yes, there are times where I get asked some very ridiculous things as chair of the board. Once I was asked if I could just rustle up a couple $1 million just to endow a cello to the orchestra. And this is an orchestra, by the way, but the budget is $13 million a year. So, sure. I'm not really understanding of how this works, but you have to put up with stuff like that, and you can answer with humility and humor and say to them, yes, if you can help us raise another $50 million, I'll absolutely do that for you. But things like that. But for the most part, people want to feel like they're appreciated. And if you look at any organization, whether it's a widget factory or an orchestra or an amusement park or a big bank, the average person doing the work, if they don't feel appreciated, that entity is not going to thrive. And appreciation generally I don't think comes from money. Money is a part of that, but it's also how you treat people. And so just as, as an example with the Philharmonic, just simply asking questions, getting to know people, and always be listening and thinking like maybe there's more than one way to do things. If I have any tangible skill, it's probably that. I'm not locked into one way of doing things. I think there's a set of core principles. I mean, you invest in certain things to make a certain return with a certain amount of risk, and that doesn't deviate too much over time. But how you do all the other stuff, there's a lot of variability to it. And I'm all for good ideas and execution of those ideas, and I don't really care where the idea came from or what we did 10 years ago, how does it relate to now? It's what have we learned, and how can we use that to help people in anything that we do?
I don't think this is going to go out of style in the age of AI. In fact, I think this is going to become an even greater point for growth for individual, for leaders, for teams, for organizations, which is just to simply go all in on people. And I think in strategic frameworks, and so ALL is an acronym for ask really good questions, learn or listen to listen, and then learn through observation. So ask, listen, and learn. And when you have that curious mind, I think the other point you made that really bridges an interesting dot is you mentioned humility and humor. Let's jump to the humor side as we start to wrap up, because I think this is the next thing that you're talking about as you're continuing to grow, which is the stand-up comedy. I find this super fascinating because it's an area of, to be honest, sheer terror for me. I don't know. That's like if I got on stage and told jokes, I would just tell dad jokes. In fact, my kids made me a dad joke book for Father's Day 1 year. It was the best gift. I have it in my closet. But how did you find your way into the world of stand-up comedy?
Well, what's interesting, JR, and again, these are not scripted questions, I know. So let me continue with my story, which will lead to the answer to your question. So when I was asking people about themselves at the Philharmonic, I met a couple of musicians, and before the concerts, they have what are called pre-concert chats. So for half an hour, and most orchestras have some version of this, you have a host
Correct.
go on stage as people are coming in, and you interview people. So in our case, it's 30 minutes, you have 2 or 3 guests, and I was asked if I would do 3 of these as sort of a test run. So the other hosts were all musicians. But I think they sensed in me there's a curiosity. I'm not a musician, so I'm an absolute layperson asking these questions. And I started doing these maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and then I became one of the permanent hosts. So during the concert season, I'll do about 15 of these chats throughout the year where I'm on a stage, and on a good night, you'll have 1,000 people watching. And you're on a stage, people are all around you and behind you, and you have a microphone, and you have a guest, and you have no notes of any kind. I mean, I've done research, but it's not in front of me because the table's nice and clean.
Well, it's like us right now. Like there are no notes guiding this conversation. And I did want to just interject on a personal point why I really appreciate the work you're doing with the orchestra. So Houston Symphony has been a big part of our life here as a family, but also like I was a violist, growing up.
Okay.
So I played in the orchestra.
Wow.
And then now my kids were highly influenced, particularly my 2 oldest, with the 2 cellos. As kids, well, they watched them, and
that's amazing. Well, I'm really good friends with Hans Graf. Hans Graf's a great friend of mine. He was the former music director here, and then he went to Houston after Calgary. So he's still a very good friend of mine. He's still a world-renowned conductor. So there's that.
Yeah, what a small world.
That's really neat.
Yeah,
but when I was on stage one day, a scout from a comedy club saw me, and he said, "I've seen you do this 2 or 3 times now." I wasn't aware he was watching me, and he said, "This is getting really good. You got to try the purest form of this, which is stand-up comedy." And I had never thought about it, but as I was more comfortable on stage, it did start getting more humorous, and so I thought, why not do this as a way to really challenge myself? Because I do things with my church where I write my own prayers and say them in front of the congregation. I give technical talks about tax and investments. I do stuff on stage about music, and I thought, why not just round it out and you can have the whole spectrum. And there are months where I will do all 4 of those iterations in 1 month. And my hope is that if you or anyone else were to see me for the first time, they would say that guy sounded really genuine in those moments I saw him. Like when I'm talking about tax, I'm not joking around. I make it accessible, but I'm not joking around. It's a serious topic. But comedy, to me, was the purest way that I could challenge myself. In the number one reverse bucket list, I would say, people that would never do comedy, that's what most people would say, I'd rather die than do stand-up comedy. I think that's still the case, where number one fear is public speaking, especially stand-up. Number two is dying. But I just found it became addictive, though. I mean, you're trying things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I can tell you, one of my jokes is about entitled Caucasian financial guys like myself. And one of the most entitled groups on earth, I think. And I'll say, if you want to make yourself relatable, get up on stage in front of people where there's maybe one white face in the audience and try to make people laugh. And it not only make people laugh, but try to be empathetic, because that's how you make people laugh. I'll always pick somebody who looks like the most angry person in the crowd and tell a joke right to them and see if I can get them on side. Because if you can do that, I think that translates to anything else you do. You can make yourself relatable. At our golf course, which is again full of the very people I was just making fun of, the clubhouse people who are probably 18 years old, they'll come over and say, "Hey JC, how was your latest set?" And all these other people are like, "What are you talking about? I didn't even know he did this." So I think it's the kind of thing where when people find out I do that, they're always intrigued. And then when I tell them, here was the progression. This was not something I'm just winging it. When I look back on it, there was definitely a progression of, I got more confident, I got better at slowing down and analyzing and pivoting. And then the two shows last week, it was weird. The Monday night one was sort of medium, I would say. And then Tuesday night, I told a lot of the same material. I made a couple of tweaks, and it was just so much better. So you have to be self-critical.
It's that rapid learning.
Right, you have to be self-critical, and you have to be empathetic, and those are two skills a lot of guys don't traditionally have. And so I think it's really made me a better human being and more relatable to a whole swath of people that maybe I wasn't before.
You know, as we wrap up, I think is a fantastic point, because I always want to send someone who's made it this far in our conversation, I want to send them off with an action that they can take to level up themselves, to level up their business as an entrepreneur. You've touched on a couple of things. We've talked about perspective, but we've also talked about empathy. But I think there's a third area here, which is adaptability. And in my second book, Banking on Change, I propose a formulaic approach to where EQ plus AQ is going to be greater than IQ in the age of AI, meaning emotional intelligence and your adaptability quotient is going to be greater than just what you know. What can an entrepreneur who is watching or listening, what can they do to continuously raise, as you have done, their EQ, their emotional intelligence, their empathy, while at the same time that's going to help them to become even more adaptable in the worlds that they're creating value in?
I think the biggest thing is, oftentimes, especially business people, and we're all guilty of it, we go into a situation almost wanting to predetermine the outcome. So my advice is, put yourself in positions, whether it's an industry group or a social group or maybe an event you've been thinking about. Go into something out of curiosity with no sense of what the outcome is going to be. So the victory is, you go into something just to learn. You're not doing it because I need to meet this particular person who will give me money, or this person I need to look good in front of, or my spouse is pushing me to do this. It's purely for you growing as a human being. That's the outcome, nothing else. And if you do that without any sense of like, well, if I don't get this out of this, it's not going to be a success. It's going to be a success because you showed up and you opened your mind and you learned something.
Can I build on that?
Absolutely, of course.
You opened your mind, but I think you did something even deeper. You opened your heart.
Opening your heart. Very good point.
Your heart. Because that's where that's that human connection it's made right here. It's made in the heart. Man, I appreciate you opening your heart.
Thank you. You as well. I think I became nicer as I became more successful. I'm one of those rare people. If you would have met me 10 years ago, I don't think you would have liked me as much. I was a much more of a one-dimensional guy, and I really tried hard to be more multidimensional. Really as a way to be a happier human being. But it's amazing. I think as you find as well, JR, because you have a great personality and breadth of knowledge that you draw people to you then. You never have to worry about happiness again because people love to see you. They're like, man, the energy you bring is just awesome. They're just genuinely happy to see you. It's a great feeling,
Well,
and it just feeds on itself.
I'm happy to see you. I'm happy to see you. I'm happy to share time, and I'm so happy for the unique wisdom that you've shared today. If someone wants to connect with you, and they're like, you know what, I like this guy because he made me feel happy too. He made me connect, and I want to hear him tell a joke. What's the best way for them to reach out and say hello to you?
Actually, probably the two best ways are LinkedIn and Instagram. So LinkedIn, if you just Google Jeremy Clark Calgary, LinkedIn, I have a account there that I'm on quite a bit, and then Instagram is jclark.worldwide. Not to get too far ahead of myself or anything, JR, but worldwide is
Worldwide. Hey, that's it. That's the future self. So connect with Jeremy, learn with Jeremy, level up and grow with Jeremy. Dude, thanks so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun today, buddy.
I agree. Thanks, JR. Appreciate you.
Thank you again for tuning in today to learn, to grow, to level up together with Jeremy's unique wisdom. If you are a visionary B2B entrepreneur who wants to transform your past experience of your most valuable assets as an entrepreneur, you want to transfer that experience into IP that elevates your influence and increases your income, send me a text right now, 832-240-1922, because I want to teach you. I want to show you how you can turn video content just like this into a book that monetizes your unique wisdom.